Alright, so let me paint you a picture. Skies bleeding grey, oceans rising like they are hungry, streets cracking, cities gasping. Actually, not in 100 years, but in 5. By 2030, the sea won't knock politely. It will kick down the damn door. And what exactly are we doing? Scrolling, tweeting, debating whether the world is really that bad. Meanwhile, Lagos is drowning, Alexandria is sinking, Mombasa already coughing salt water. But nobody is panicking. No state of emergency, no headlines screaming African future is flooded, because these are black cities, right? Brown people, disposable lives. And that's the part no one wants to say out loud. This isn't a documentary, it is an obituary waiting to be written. Millions will be swallowed alive by floods, by silence, by the slow suffocation of indifference. And the world, well, it keeps sipping lattes, launching satellites, signing climate pledges with ink made of lies. So here is a warning. This video is not for the soft-hearted. It is not for the politicians or plastic activists. It is for the ones who feel something when the head screams. Because what's coming isn't just a flood, it is reckoning. Now let me tell you this. The ocean is not coming. It is already here actually. Creeping in inch by inch, year after year. Global sea levels are rising by 3 to 4 millimeters annually. Doesn't sound like much, right? But stack that over time and you are looking at roughly 0.3 meters by 2030. According to data from the World Meteorological Organization, that's enough to put entire coastlines on life support. And Africa, she is standing right in flood crusher. The African Center of Strategic Studies estimates that by 2030, 170 million Africans would be living below the future high tide line. That's not a science fiction. That is the forecast. And the damage is already showing. Flooding, erosion are wiping out natural barriers, wetlands, dunes, beaches, and the ones used to stand between the sea and the streets. But here's the kicker. Majority of these cities weren't built with future in mind. No planning, no strategy, just chaos. Slums and highways now sit where marshals once breathed. So every time heavy rains fall or tide surge, water doesn't just rise, it invades. Weak infrastructure, rising seas. This isn't risk, it is a slow, devastating collapse that had already begun. Now let's talk about Lagos as the first in Africa. Africa's biggest city with over 21 million people, a mega city built on sand, sweat and stubborn hope. But here's the ugly truth. Nearly half of Lagos sits or below sea level. This is not speculation. This is straight from Reuters and confirmed by the African Center for Strategic Studies. This city isn't just flirting with disaster, it is married to it. Year after year, the floods come like clockwork. Lekki, Ikoyi, Haja, streets turn into rivers. Homes, drowns, cars, floats. But why? Because poor drainage and reckless developments on floodplains have left Lagos wide open and defenseless, as reported by climate champions and African Center Organization. And the price? $4 billion lost every single year, according to a World Bank study. Not in theory, in cold, painful reality. Actually, scientists now say that if warming keeps up, part of Lagos Island and Lekki could be permanently underwater by 2030. Well, in a worst case scenario, 1/3 of the entire population could be displaced, pushed out by the same sea the city was built too close to. This isn't just a flooding problem, this is Lagos gasping for air. Now, let's head north to a city that watched empires rise and fall, to a place older than most countries, Alexandria in Egypt. A city carved into the edge of Nile Delta, holding around 5.5 million souls and barely holding the line between land and sea. But Alexandria isn't just ancient, it is endangered. UNESCO had raised the alarm, calling it one of the Mediterranean cities that must be tsunami ready by 2030. But this isn't one freak wave. This is about relentless ocean creeping in inch by inch. Actually, recent projections from the African Center for Strategic Studies warn that 0.5 meter sea level rise could drown entire districts, forcing over 2 million people to flee their homes. Push that to 1 full meter and you are looking at $50 billion in assets wiped out and historical neighborhood lost forever. And here's the part nobody actually wants to say out loud. It's already happening. Winter storms are flooding the Corniche, one of the city's main arteries, while salt water seeps into Nile Delta, choking Egypt's farmland, threatening food security at its core. Alexandria doesn't need to wait until 2050 to drown. It's already knee-deep in the future. Now, let's shift west to a city where the Atlantic isn't just nearby, it's breathing down its neck. Welcome to Abidjan, Ivory Coast, a booming port city built on low ground and even lower chances of surviving what's coming. For years, experts have sounded the alarm, warning that without drastic action, Abidjan could be flooded beyond recognition in the coming decades. But the clock's ticking faster now. Here's why. Half the population lives below 10 meters of elevation, and the worst, the shorelines vanishing by meter every year. Entire chunks of land swallowed without a trace. Major infrastructure, the ports, the airports, key lifelines of the country all sit down 1 meter above sea level. You don't need a storm to sink the city, just time. And the time's already doing the damage. Heavy rains are turning into monthly disasters, especially in poorer districts. Homes collapse, power lines go dark, streets disappear underground, swelling, flood water. Here's the thing, Ivory Coast is already losing over $1.2 billion every year to rain and river flooding. And the rising sea, well, they are about to multiply their costs and the pain that comes with it. Abidjan isn't preparing for disaster, it is actually living in it. Now, let's go east to a place exploding with people, promise and pressure. This is Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, a coastal giant with over 7 million people, stretched across the flat land like it's daring the sea to come closer. And it is, actually. Dar's population is set to double by 2030, but the infrastructure, well, it is not catching up, not even close at all. There is no elevation, no road defenses, just millions of people stuck in the paths of rising tides. Right now, 39% of Dar's residents, about 2 million people, already live in flood-prone zones. That's not a worst-case scenario. That is today. The Mombasa River bursts its bank like clockwork, drowning low-income neighborhoods under filthy runoff. Homes gone, clinics flooded, roads useless, and there is nothing to stop salt water from pushing further inland, not even during moderate sea level rise. One deep dive analysis warned that Dar Slum Hospital and K Road will be repeatedly flooded as the climate crisis ramps up. No elevated barriers, no protection, just a city lying flat on its back, staring straight into the storm. Now we head to the coast of Kenya, to a city carved into the Indian Ocean, known as Mombasa, a port city with over 1 million residents, clinging to island and a narrow sand spits like it's holding its breath. But that breath, it's actually running out. Coastal erosion is eating Mombasa alive. According to researchers at the Symptom Center, nearly 1/3 of the city lies in dangerously low lying zone. And here's the kicker. Just 0.3 meters of sea rise expected between 2030 and 2050 could flood 70% of Mombasa. That is not a guess. That is the projection from climate experts watching the city slide underwater in real time. Beachfront neighborhoods, hotels, entire village wiped out regularly. And without warning signs, they are not future things. In 2017, Mombasa got hit with 235 millimeters of rain in just a single day. Yali Beach was swallowed, residents died, homes were destroyed, tourism stopped, lives collapsed, and now, due to the rising sea and the violent weather, Many parts of Mombasa are expected to be unlivable by 2030. This isn't a storm, it is a slow drowning, and Mombasa is already chest deep. Now, listen very carefully. Let's just stop talking about city for a second and start talking about people. Because behind every flooded street, there is a mother carrying a child through waist-high water. Behind every economic loss, there is a father watching his home split apart in the rain. This is the real cost. As Reuters pointed out years ago, Lagos lies on the coast, most of it below sea level, and every flood hits harder than the last. The city's flood defenses, well, they can't keep up, and when the monsoons roll in, tens of thousands scramble for shelter as entire roads, markets, and neighbors vanish beneath muddy waves. Over in Dar es Salaam, World Bank data confirms that nearly 2 million people, almost 40% of the city, have been hit by flooding in recent years. That is not a warning, that is the raw fact. And in 2022, Nigeria faced a record-breaking floods. Over 1.3 million people were affected nationwide, according to climate analysts. And in Lagos alone, flood waters surged into homes, sparked mass evacuations, and left whole community knee-deep in debt. Dangerous runoff. And so, seriously, tell me, what happens after the water leaves? Well, the floor rots, the walls fall, the wells are poisoned, and diseases spread like wildfire. Across African coastal regions, farmers are watching salt water creep into their fields, killing off rice paddies. Fishermen are losing coral reefs that once fed entire families. In Abidjan, it is no better. After violent storms in 2019, UNESCO reported mass relocations in Grand Bassam as families were once again forced to flee rising water. This is the new normal. Displacement, disease, ruined livelihood, and a rising tide of climate refugee with nowhere else to go. Now, here is where it gets personal. Because floods are tragic, storms are cruel, but you know what's worse? Knowing someone could have stopped it and choose not to. Now let's talk about the government. Let's talk about the money that was supposed to use to save lives and vanished before the first raindrop fell. In Nigeria, between 2012 and 2021, the government set aside a massive 548 billion naira, that is $100 million, for flood prevention and environmental projects. That could have meant a stronger drainage, safer communities, and real resilience. But what happened? Corruption, plain and brutal. According to the Institute of Security Studies, most of those funds were siphoned off, diverted into unrelated projects, or lost in the black hole of government fraud. While Lagos flooded, the cash floated somewhere else. One ISS analysis didn't sugarcoat it. Fraud and corruption will undercut climate change intervention and limit adaptation infrastructure. And that is exactly what is happening. In one example, a $10 million World Bank loan to build a storm drains in Niger State, Nigeria is still sitting untouched years after it was approved. No progress, no drains, just silence. Meanwhile, urban planning is chaos. High rises and slums pop up on wetland and riverbeds. Unchecked, drainage channels paved over, garbage filling flood paths, cities choking themselves. Even the meteorologists are warning that the response isn't strategy, it is panic. Just fragmented and reactive efforts deployed after the damage is already done. So no, this isn't just climate change, this is climate betrayal, and the price paid in lives. Anyway, if you are still thinking this is just a fear-mongering, let me show you a cold and brutal math. According to a 2022 report by the World Meteorological Organization, by 2030, as many as 180 million extremely poor Africans will be hit by a triple threat: drought, flood, and unbearable heat unless something changes. And the maps, they are terrifying. Satellite imagery shows coastlines in cities like Lagos and Mombasa creeping inland, little by little. Every year, the sea takes more. Just look at the NASA image of Tanzania refugee delta. Entire flood plains appear in just months of heavy rain. Land disappears like it was never there. And it is not just scenery, it is value. $65 to $86 billion in coastal assets, housing, roads, hospital, all at risk in Africa's largest cities. And this is according to the research by the African Center for Strategic Studies. Now, let's talk specifics. A sea level of just 0.3 meters, very likely by 2030, would drown 17% of Mombasa and flood in huge swaths of Lagos and Alexandria. Based on the data from the Stimson Center and the African Center, and if the rise hits around 0.5 meters, that is enough to sink 1/3 of Alexandria and force millions of people off Nile Delta farmland. And not someday, not next century, but soon. These aren't predictions. These are warning. Millions displaced, billions lost, and still silence. Now, let's get something straight. This disaster isn't inevitable, but the window to fix it is definitely slamming shut. If we want to stop millions from losing their homes, their future, their lives, we need to rethink our cities from the ground up. That means no more building on floodplains, no more slums stacked on dead wetlands. That means cities have to stop acting like the water isn't coming and start preparing like their survival depends on it, because it does. Take Lagos. What it needs urgently is storm drains that actually work, canals that are protected, not clogged and buried. Dar es Salaam, that city needs elevated roads, drainage pumps in the Mombasa basin, and a real plan before the next rainy season becomes a death sentence. Early warning systems, siren, text alert, real-time updates can be the difference between evacuation and tragedy, but they have to exist. So, do evacuation shelters built on high grounds not in the path of the flood. And most of all, zoning laws must mean something. Enforcement has to be real, because every time someone builds a mansion or a market where water should flow, they are digging someone else's grave. Actually, reports from the African Center for Strategic Studies and the Climate Change News are crystal clear. The longer we wait to adapt, the higher the cost and the deeper the pain. So we act now or we pay forever. And here's the wild part. Some of the strongest flood protection doesn't actually cost billions. It grows, it breathes, it's already here. The nature just needs a chance to do its job. Mangroves, wetlands, downs, barrier highlands. These aren't just pretty features on the map. They are natural armor. They absorb storm surge better than concrete ever could. And right now, they are either gone or disappearing fast. But the African Center for Strategic Studies has made it clear. If we restore mangrove forests around places like Dakar, Abidjan, and Mombasa, we could dramatically lower flood heights. This tangled route once held back the sea. They can do it again. In Lagos, scientists are already proposing bold moves, reviving the coastal lagoons, planting Nile's bundles, native reeds that act like a living shield against waves. These living shorelines don't just block floods, they protect fish, clean the water, and rebuild ecosystem from the ground up. And it goes deeper. Re-establishing inland wetlands, not covering them in concrete, could turn flood zone into natural basins. Studies actually show it. Just a few kilometers of green cover can actually cut damages cost in half. Half. We don't need to invest something new. We just need to stop killing what already works. Let's not pretend money isn't part of this, because the truth is, there is enough money in the world to fight these floods, to protect these cities, to save lives. The problem? It is sitting in the wrong hands, or going nowhere at all. Wealthy nations made promises. Promises to fund adaptation, to help the world's most vulnerable brace for the storm they didn't create. But too often, that fund shows up late, small, or not at all. And on the home front, African governments have their own demons to slay. Because even when the money comes, graft and greed eat it alive. Climate funds meant for storm barriers and flood control, They vanish into luxury cars and ghost projects. Seriously, that should definitely end now, and oversight has to be real. Local communities should have the power to watch every dollar through citizen budgets, audits, whatever it takes. Let the people on the ground track the promises, not just suffer the consequences. And while we are at it, developers must be held accountable. No more damming the river to build shopping malls. No more blocking drainage for quick profits. Building codes must be climate resilient, and breaking them shouldn't just be a fine, it should be a shutdown. Seriously, let's get something straight before we actually close this one out. Africa didn't cause this. The entire continent is responsible for just 3.8% of global greenhouse gas emissions according to the report from Quartz. But the flood, the heat waves, the droughts, Africans take the heat first and the hardest. So, no, this isn't just about adaptation, this is about justice. World leaders love to talk, they make pledges, shake hands, drop buzzwords like climate resilience and green partnership. But while they talk, entire cities are sinking. It's time for those same leaders to deliver, cut the carbon and pay for the damages already done. Not as charity, but as accountability. Because unless we combine local action with global justice, unless we fix what is happening in city planning, Lagos will drown, Alexandria will fall, Mombasa will be in memory, and millions of people who have nothing to do with this crisis will be forced to carry it on their backs. But here's the part that still actually matters. It seriously doesn't have to end this way. Because with smart planning, with nature brought back to life, with leaders who actually protect instead of pockets, we can still stop the worst. The water is closing in, the deadline is rising, but the fight, seriously, that is still up to us.